Okay, so in lesson 19, we're talking about collision detection. So in this lesson, you're going to be able to detect when the sprites are touching or overlapping, and then change the program in response. So if we think about condition and conditionals, this would be the condition when things are touching, the sprites are touching, and the conditional is whatever we want to change the program to. We're going to talk about abstractions and how to manage the complexity of the code as well. So we're learning about this collision detection. Similar to the other lesson 18, it's simply to make things a little bit less complicated. So we're going to be learning, again, this new block is touching to kind of deal with those scenarios. Alright, so as far as the code goes, we started with puzzle 2. We had a discussion on what was happening in this code. I'm not going to spend time in this video going over that. You guys are asked to work on a few projects, I guess, to practice some of this, and we start with a discussion. We're going to actually look at code, and if we didn't have this simplified version, we discussed in class how this is what our code would look like. So it's pretty complicated. So we're learning of a way to simplify this, and that's what we start looking at in bubble 4. In bubble 4, we're introduced to the is touching block inside the if statement, and simply we're asked to create the condition, which is using the is touching block. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to drag the is touching block over here. If what is touching what? Okay, we're trying to see if, where does it say? If the bunny is touching the dinner. So if bunny touches the dinner, okay, if the if the bunny touches the dinner, the bowl, this happens. The stuff inside the if statement happens. So this is the condition. If the bunny is touching the dinner, the conditional is the bunny stops, the dinner stops, robot stops, and then the dinner animation turns to a bowl. If you notice, it erased the stew. Alright, so that was number 4. I think that's just kind of practice using that new condition. And number 5, we're looking at a different scenario. And if we run it, we're going to notice, or I guess what we want to do is we only want the blender to shake, if we look at the sample, when the apple kind of falls into the blender. Notice when it plays at first, it's still, and then it shakes at the end. Whereas our code is already shaking. Okay, so we still need to know and understand the animations from before. In this case, the random number tool, random number strategy to animate the blender. What we're going to do is we're going to use the new code we learned to check whether the blender is touching the apple. So I'm going to go ahead and start with that. That's under control. That's the if statement. I'm going to drag it here under shake the blender. Okay, we need to consider what's the condition. What are we checking for? Well, we're checking to see if the blender is touching the apple. And that's the new code we learned is touching. I'm going to drag that that condition into the if statement. I'm going to go ahead and put blender. And what are we checking? If the blender is touching, we're checking if it's touching the apple. Okay, if that happens, then we want it to shake. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drag this block into here. I'm going to reset it. I'm going to run it. Notice it's still at first, and then as soon as the apple touches the blender starts to shake. Alright. The final bubble I'm going to do in this video is helping us understand and use the debug tool. So we looked at this puzzle and we were asked to move the tack, and I'm using the arrow keys to move it. And then we noticed that the balloon pops early. Okay, I'm going to reset it again, and we notice it touches right now. Okay, so it hasn't touched the balloon yet, so you know what's going on. Okay, and that's what we're asked to figure out in this. So we're going to use the debug tool to help us figure this out. So we ran the code and we tried it out. We're going to change the debug to false. I wish they showed us where it was, but it's in line 3 right here. Sorry, we're changing it to true from false. We're going to add a new debug block to the code and set the tack sprites debug property to true. So I'm going to do it under tack right here. I'm going to change this to tack, and then we're going to change this to true. Okay, so essentially we're gonna notice when we hit run, what that does is it kind of shows kind of where the location is. Okay, and we notice that the balloon is this wide. Okay, so that's kind of the trick behind this. Okay, the tack is also fairly large too, but as soon as the borders touches right now, it turns to the pop. All right, so that's lesson 19. It's a lot of practice in one. We did learn about the is touching, that's the big one, but we also learned how to use the debug tool a little bit as well to help us out with this with our programs.